Hey everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Today we are focusing on Remembrance Day looks. Although it is a day where we typically see lots and lots of black, even the Festival of Remembrance, throughout the whole weekend, whenever we see the royal family, it's often, for the ladies at least, lots of black or more subtle, subdued outfits. However, that's not to say that they are boring in any way, shape, or form. It's clear that the royal family prioritizes honoring those who served in the military, those who we have lost, and they take those tributes very seriously. It inspires others or reminds others to give thanks and show appreciation to those who served and to reach out to help organizations that are there for veterans, military families, and beyond. And with that said, it's time to take a look at some of the most fabulous Remembrance Day outfits from Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and compare it to what Meghan Markle chose to wear over the course of her very few Remembrance Day weekends. If you missed the video where I recapped what Meghan Markle has been wearing for this year's Veterans Day weekends, sort of event, I guess, that they attended, I will link it for you guys up top. But this year, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, paid tribute to the late, great Queen Elizabeth by wearing her 3-strand pearl necklace, which is the necklace that Queen Elizabeth was wearing pretty much every single day. So I cannot think of a better way to keep the Queen close to not only Kate's heart, but to all of us, to remind us of her and make us feel a little bit like she's still here in some way with us. It was the perfect way to honor her. Kate wore this ensemble to the Festival of Remembrance this year at Royal Albert Hall, where King Charles unveiled a new set of statues of Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth. The life-size sculptures were commissioned by the Royal Albert Hall to mark their 150th anniversary celebrations. She wore this very simple Amelia Wickstead dress, which allowed the pearls and the poppy pin to be the only focal points of the look, which was really smart. It was a respectful choice, and it just makes sense. When you have something like that that's going to draw the eye and draw a lot of attention, then it's a perfect formula to keep the rest of your look really muted, to not have anything competing or any sort of a neckline interfering with them in any way, shape, or form. So I thought it was really perfect and nicely balanced. Then for Remembrance Sunday, she paid tribute to the Queen again with these earrings. They appear to be repurposed from Queen Elizabeth's diamond and pearl leaf brooch. So it's not been confirmed that that's where these earrings come from, but lots of articles and people who really know their stuff, this looks like they turned that brooch into a pair of earrings, which is another beautiful tribute. She re-wore one of my absolute favorite coats. This is her Catherine Walker coat, and we're going to talk more about it later when we talk about the first time that she wore it. But she's also wearing this Philip Tracy hat, which she's repeated several times throughout my Remembrance Day Sundays. It was one of the first big hats that she wore. This was an excellent look. Very, very lovely tributes. The Queen also looked lovely. She's got this same coat dress in other colors. It's a very flattering cut for her. The stitching on it just create a nice silhouette for her. And I love her hat. Camilla has the best hats and she wears them so well. This is no different. King Charles and Prince William, of course, also looked very, very nice. Though it is a somber event, they do a beautiful job of honoring veterans and encouraging appreciation for their sacrifices. And they just look so polished and regal doing so. It was a beautiful service. But now let's take a look back in time at Kate's first appearance as the Duchess of Cambridge for Remembrance Day back in 2011. This coat is the same one that she wore again in 2012 and 2016. I quite like it, but honestly it's not my favorite coat of hers. It has quite the heavy collar, it's quite chunky and thick, and then it's got really big buttons that are not in your standard straight up and down pattern. They kind of come in a curve across the chest and then straight. So it's just not my favorite coat of hers, but I don't hate it either. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not my personal favorite. This hat, though, is one of my personal favorites. I absolutely love this hat on her. She wore this hat again in 2014 for Remembrance Day, and I like how she styled her hair here. It's pinned back on the one side. It's actually pinned back. It was modest and respectful, and it didn't overwhelm her look or close her in or anything like that. If it were over both shoulders, she would have looked really cluttered, and it shows a good example of that balance of wearing something you like this hat that's maybe a little bit more stylish and fashion forward, but pairing it up with things that are appropriate and respectful for the event, like this coat. But let's compare this to what Meghan wore for her first Remembrance Day. Her first year of Remembrance Day events, she wore many, many different outfits. But one of the things she wore was this coat. I think it's a Stella McCartney coat, but I'm not positive. And this bow is just obnoxious. It's a satin bow. So it really reminds me of like a bathrobe or like a dressing robe of some sort. It just really stands out because it catches the light because it's got that sort of shine. So the texture change here is just really dominating the look. And the bow itself is big already, but this makes it look even bigger. It's already big, and she doesn't need a big bow right here in the center of her stomach. It's not going to flatter her figure in any way. In fact, it's just making things look wider and more cluttered and big and clumsy. Overall, it just made her whole look really messy, and her makeup is really underblended here. You can see like under eye concealer that she just didn't blend out, or she had the complete wrong shade. She either went like 2 or 3 shades too light for this and then was doing really dark, like, you know, orange bronzer for these areas, or she just didn't blend it enough, or both. Perhaps it's both. I honestly feel like it was too light of a shade and underblended. But if you can see where under eye concealer is, that you're doing it wrong. You just are. You shouldn't be able to see where it is. So I feel like it's best to skip unless you really truly need it. And she probably should have just skipped it if she didn't know what she was doing. And her nylons are wet. So she's even more messy than usual, you guys. This is, now that I'm looking at it, this is one of the messiest looks she's ever had because she was probably taking humongous steps like we know she does, splashed into a puddle and got water, puddle water all over her nylons. So, I mean, that just adds to the messiness of the look and looks really bad. But this is exactly why we talk about the importance of following etiquette and taking smaller steps. Like, this could happen to any of us, stepping in a puddle like this. This could happen to the fabulous, wonderful, perfect Catherine, Princess of Wales. Of course it could. This is a normal thing that happens. The problem is that we know Meghan Markle takes ridiculously huge strides. She takes huge steps. She takes steps just as big or bigger than Harry, and she's much shorter than him, and she's a lady. You shouldn't be taking that big of steps because then you can't control as easily and foresee where those puddles are and avoid them gracefully. If you take smaller steps, you give yourself time to notice where the puddles are. It gives yourself time to avoid the puddles. And if you're walking a little slower, a little more graceful, smaller steps, you're less likely to splash and get it all over your tights. So this is just another example of how taking the time and care to avoid puddles and things like that can help you look nice and polished, and you can achieve that simply by not taking huge dramatic steps and trying to race to the front of the line. That same year, she had another outing with Prince Harry in an outfit of a million textures. There's too much competition here. Meghan Markle wore a $1,795 Centaur wrap coat or Centaur wrap coat, an $806 Philip Tracy fascinator, when the Duke and Duchess of Sussex paid tribute to the armed forces at the 91st Field of Remembrance at Windsor Abbey. I have so many problems with this look. First off, the fascinator in and of itself is great. I quite like it. It's a good shape for her. It's not too voluminous. She's not used to wearing hats and fascinators, so this is a really nice option because it's just sort of petite. It's not going to make her feel overwhelmed by it or perhaps like a little uncomfortable as she adjusts to hat wearing. So the fascinator is good by itself, and I quite like netting or veils on these things. I think that that's a really pretty detail. But the problem is that it's like navy. It looks like navy suede. And then her coat is black, like fuzzy wool, like almost like teddy texture. And it's thick and heavy and chunky. It almost looks like carpet. And so it's giving off an almost grayish black or charcoal look. And then her boots are black. So the navy does not fit here. She should have had her hair back because it's really closing her in between the texture and volume of the coat. It's just making her look really, really closed in. The belt on top of this coat is probably the worst part of this outfit. It is so sloppy and messy. She's got this little belt that doesn't match anything on top of this huge coat. It's clearly not going together well. This is not cohesive in any way. All of this is just big, fuzzy, clumsy, and heavy visually. It's just, it looks like a heavy coat. You've got all this heavy boots down here. These boots are really slouchy and heavy, weighing down the look so much. This is just a bad look. It looks so disheveled. It looks so messy and sloppy. Like, I mean, could you imagine the hair blowing around? There's so much room in the coat and the belt, and just like the boots have a lot of room in them. Gloves on, just like everything is going everywhere, and it's too much. Then for Remembrance Day service that year, she was allegedly sour for being on the other balcony with Germany's First Lady. This hat is velvety, so I think it did look a bit odd in some pictures. Some of you guys say it looks photoshopped, which is hilarious, but honestly, it's a decent hat shape for her in terms of like hat and head matching nicely and looking okay. But yeah, I agree. The really light absorbing velvet texture of it maybe wasn't the best approach. The coat here though is just awful. It's called the capelet coat by Givenchy, and I just do not like it at all. It exaggerates the shoulder width so much. It reminds me of a t-shirt on top of a long sleeve, which is just kind of a disjointed look for this coat. It's creating a strange line across the shoulder chest area that's just not flattering. It's widening. It's not good. She doesn't need that for her figure, but also in general, I don't really like this coat for like anybody. They could have just stitched it. They didn't need to have the flap happening because it just looked bad. If they had stitched it and it was just a stitching detailing, I still would have preferred it not to have happened because that horizontal line will widen her shoulder line no matter what, which is the opposite of what she needs. But it still would have been a million miles better than this actually hanging off of her shoulder the way it is. It just looks ridiculous. She also has her blush placed so low. This is so strange that she does this. Why, rather than blushing the apples of her cheeks up here, she puts blush and like contour down here on the sides of her mouth. It's insane. From a makeup artist perspective, this looks so wrong, and there's no reason why anybody should ever do that. Unless you're trying to look like you have literally been running and your like cheeks are reddening because you've been running and exercising in the cold weather. Like you're cold and you've been exercising. Then, you know, your cheeks get really, really red and they can get really red down low. That's the only time that you would want to do that if you were like making costume makeup for someone and you're trying to make them look like they have been running in the cold. Why is she doing that? It's so strange. Later, she changed again into a somewhat controversial dress for the church service. It would be best to not do a boat neck here in this situation because the church prefers and requests that people not expose their shoulders. But Meg was firmly in her I must expose my shoulders at all costs phase. So it didn't matter the venue, she was going to try to show her shoulders in some way, shape, or form, no matter what, which is unfortunate and disrespectful in a lot of ways. She wore this, which in a different venue really wouldn't raise any eyebrows in terms of appropriateness, but because of the church venue, it did. I dislike it for her in general though, because the buttons are really big and chunky, and then you have a really big chunky belt that's up pretty high. I mean, it's not as high as some of her belts, but it's right there, which is just adding a lot of visual weight right here. It's drawing the eye right there and you have nowhere else to go. You just kind of stay staring at that big chunky belt when you look at this garment on her. It's creating a widening effect to her torso. She's not getting any sort of a waistline established here. It's widening the look of her shoulders as well. And because she's short-waisted, she would have benefited from the belt being a little bit lower just to give her a more balanced proportion. For somebody who does have a well-defined waist, I could see this complementing their waistline really, really nicely, but she doesn't, so it actually exaggerates the width of her waistline. I also really don't like the Aquazzura shoes with this. They have become like my absolute least favorite shoes in the world because they are so messy. They're slingbacks, which already exposes a little bit of the heel and has like a strap effect at the heel, which already adds a little bit of visual noise. And then they have the bow or butterfly thing at the back too. Both. Too much mess. It's not polished. It gives more of an evening vibe, those shoes do, than this sort of church service or professional vibe. A simple pump would have been perfect. A simple block heel, or even if she had to, stilettos that were plain would be a million miles better than this messy, disjointed pair of heels. They don't match anything in this navy outfit. They don't match the vibe of the outfit. and they're just adding clutter and it doesn't look good. I will say I like the length of it and I have no problem with the hat. I just dislike the rest of it. Catherine that year, however, is wearing this green coat, which she has the same one in red. It has velvet cuffs, a velvet collar, and velvet on the pockets. It's a perfect little coat dress and it looks beautiful on her. It hits a little bit below the knee and she has on black tights, which again, Meghan maybe could have taken a note from that and worn black tights too. It's just a more polished look and it's also a more respectful look for the occasion. That year for the balcony, Catherine, now Princess of Wales, wore the Alexander McQueen coat that I loved. I am obsessed with this coat. It's so cool. I love when she wears Alexander McQueen. It's one of my favorite designers for her. They designed her wedding gown and so many of her most spectacular looks. This one is one of her best because I love the pop of this white collar here. It's something different and new for Remembrance Day looks, but it still like has that vibe and pays tribute to the military in a way, to the military uniform. It sort of echoes some of those elements. I love the buttons. I love the way it accentuates her figure. It was just fabulous. She re-wore it back in 2021 with a different hat, but I like this hat better. The next year, still on a separate balcony, the Meg wore this ensemble with a giant hat, not yet graduated to giant pants, but she did have a giant belt right under the boobs. So she was working her way up. She started giant belts, giant hats, giant pants. What's gonna happen next? I'm scared. But why? Why does she have a massive belt right under the boob? Why? It's so bizarre. I don't understand it. This didn't need this huge belt. It reminds me of maybe like a Diana cosplay in a few of her outfits. And I mean, at the time it was more in fashion to have a big chunky belt really high up. Diana did that in a few of them with a big hat for her Remembrance Day looks. So that's my best guess, is that this was Meghan's Diana cosplay Remembrance Day moment. Ugh, cringe. So cringe. I like that it's more simple, but the hat reminds me of a scarecrow. The look, again, is just kind of swallowing her up because she does have that bigger hat. She also has a really big coat, and then she has a big belt. She looks like she's closed into this little tiny box, which consequently makes her look bigger. If she were just to choose princess cut or fit and flare, it would solve so many of her problems. I mean, it's just something that would remain fitted till the lower end of her waist, like a drop waist in a way, or, you know, start its flare closer to lower on her hips. It would have given her a much more flattering silhouette. And there's better ways to pay tribute to Diana than trying to copy her look. Then for the Festival of Remembrance, she again was wearing something with lots of décolletage, a wide voop neck. This is a scoop V-neck hybrid that she has on here. It's quite open, which I don't mind because she benefits from opening this area a little bit and elongating her neck to some degree. That does help her, but it's a little bit of an odd shape. I think the framing that comes from the neckline, which that's what necklines do, really, they frame your face and neck area. The framing that comes from this is both interesting and a little distracting because it's such a different shape that we're not used to seeing. So I really can't decide if I like the shape of this neckline or not, but regardless, it has a folded collar or flap here along the neckline that's kind of adding a little bit of visual weight. And overall, the dress is kind of throwing me off because it has a texture to it, which is creating even more visual weight. Plus, it's got a lot of fabric involved in general. There's just so much fabric happening here. So it just looks a little heavy to the eye already. And then that collar having the fold makes it look a little bulky too. But it also has a huge belt right under the boobs. Again, I understand this dress probably came with this belt because it matches it perfectly. It blends in nicely and whatnot. But she needed it adjusted to have the belt a little bit lower. It's just chopping things up again. Just pull the belts down a little lower for her and it would solve so many problems. Again, something a little bit lower for the flare to begin a little closer to the tail end of her hips would help. This overall just widens her some, it shortens her some, and it's just disappointing. However, it might be the best of her Remembrance Day looks, honestly. Her hair is back clean and neat and tidy, at least for this one. You guys leave it in the comments and I will try to get a poll up for you sometime soon. Which Remembrance Day look from the Meg was your least favorite and which one do you think she was most successful in? I know you're picking from a bad bunch, but if you had to pick one as the least bad, let me know. Meanwhile, that year, Kate had one of my absolute favorites. This is the coat. This is the #1 Remembrance Day look coat for me. It's perfection. It's the one she rewore this year. It's this all black military inspired coat dress. It's exactly what one should wear on this day in this role. It's beautifully constructed. It's a careful design. It left it not feeling busy or cluttered with the swoops and the tassels. It still looks polished and elegant, simply divine. Just perfection. For Festival of Remembrance that year, she did a boat neck dress. Now, we don't see her in these very often at all because they can widen the shoulder line. She is quite balanced. The thing is, if you have balanced proportions, like Kate, she is ever so slightly wider at the shoulders than the hips, but not dramatically so, enough to throw her out of the relatively hourglass. She has a very tiny waist and a very long waist, so that benefits her a lot. But when you have relatively balanced proportions, if you wear something that widens your shoulder line, like for example, shoulder pads or a wider boat neck type situation, anything like that that's going to widen this area visually, then it throws you into that top heavy look. And we often see Catherine in things that have big flutter sleeves or shoulder pads, blazers, things like that that tend to widen the shoulder line ever so slightly. And that is why some people are under the impression that she's a little bit more inverted triangle when she's really not. She's just quite balanced. And sometimes when she plays with her silhouette a little bit, it does throw her a little out of balance at times. And this is an example of that. This might be why we don't see her in boat necks very often. Maybe she just doesn't care for them. Maybe Meghan ruined them for her. I don't know. But I don't mind it on her at all. I think it's very pretty. I think it's nice to see her in something different and interesting. It doesn't offer her any balance, but it doesn't necessarily like totally ruin things either. I don't think it's dramatically out of balance. I think it's okay. She looks gorgeous in it, and it worked fine here, especially with her hair down and back and that gorgeous little headband. She just looked perfect and pretty. So for Princess Kate's second time at the Remembrance Day service, she wore the same exact coat that she wore the first year, which I think is really endearing. It showed people that she's not out there buying something new and snazzy and fabulous for every single event, that she is re-wearing stuff already, that she already was just wearing the same coat 2 years in a row. She did, however, buy a new hat to freshen up the look, and this is the same hat that we saw this year, this bigger, wider brimmed hat, which it's not my favorite hat, I have to be honest. It's just not my absolute fave. Something about it just seems a little bit bulky. I often like smaller hats on Catherine, but I don't hate all big hats on her. It's just this particular one's not my absolute favorite, but she likes it, and that's what really matters. In 2013, after Prince George arrived, she wore this ensemble for Remembrance Day. It's absolutely beautiful. In 2014, here she has this hat on again, the one that she wore for her first Remembrance Day, in this double-breasted black coat. This is the same exact coat that I think either Zara or Sophie wore that year. I think it was Sophie. Sophie wore the exact same coat as her, though Catherine had a different dress on underneath, so the necklines look a little different of the coats, but it is the same coat, Sophie and Catherine that year in 2014, which is fun. It looks nice and cozy. Now in 2015, she had one of my absolute favorite hats, and overall the look is so fabulous. I love this hat. It has the veil. It has a little custom butterfly along the back. It's just beautiful. A lot of people said it was a bow, but it's actually a little butterfly. And the veil on it is just beautiful. I think that's such a gorgeous touch when a hat has a little veil. And this coat is fabulous. It's got the fur lining, and it's got a little bit of color blocking happening to the textures of the black. It's not actually changing color, but rather just texture, which just adds some interest. And then it's double-breasted, so it's got the 2 rows of buttons down the front, which is very flattering to her figure. Then in 2016, she re-wore that coat again, the same one that she wore for her first 2 Remembrance Days. And she has this big hat that's a little bit upturned for its brim. Again, it's not my absolute favorite, but I think it worked really nicely with the hairstyle off to the side. The asymmetry there helped to balance everything out and make it look cohesive. Then in 2017, we see that hat again from this year and from her second Remembrance Day. Now, this is probably my least favorite Remembrance Day look from her. I like the coat dress very much, and I like the buttons on it. It's a little bit reminds me of like Princess Diana's vibe, honestly, the outfit itself. But my least favorite part of it is the underturned faux bob. It's when you kind of fold the hair in and then you pin it, and it creates this like faux bob length. and I just don't like it. Amber Heard totally ruined it, but I never liked it before. When I learned how to do it, I still was like, I don't love it. Something about it just gets a little droopy looking to me. It's just not my favorite. So if she would have had her hair different for this, maybe just down and curly, it would have maybe brought a little bit more balance and looked lovely, because she didn't have a collar or a big lapel or anything for this one. So she could have got away with her hair down. In 2018, we have the debut of my second favorite coat that she's worn for Remembrance Day, which is this black Alexander McQueen coat with a white collar and red embellishments on the shoulders. We've already gone over how much better Catherine approached the day compared to Meghan's in terms of fashion, but let's take a slightly closer look here. This hat is absolutely perfect. It's very, very simple. So it's not competing with the busyness that we have going on here to allow the coat to really be the focal point, and her earrings tie in nicely with that white collar as well. In 2019, another absolutely beautiful fascinator here with the veil. I absolutely love the veil. They're almost a little bit seductive in a way, or a little bit mysterious in a way. So even though it's a somber event and whatnot, it just adds an element of beauty that is unique. And this, I believe, was the first time that we saw this, my number one most favorite Remembrance Day jacket. This military style zip up form-fitting coat. I think this is Catherine Walker, and it's just fabulous. I want this coat. Can I have it? I would love it. Please. Oh, it's beautiful and spectacular. It looks like it would be a dream to wear. It looks perfectly tailored to her, and I absolutely love the look overall with that really dramatic headpiece. Is not competing in any way because everything is all black. The choice of earrings, again, is absolutely perfect. In 2020, she had this black coat with large buttons and fringe details on the shoulders with a fascinator and a 3-poppy pin to be in honor of her great-grandmother Olive Middleton's 3 brothers who all fought and died in World War I. What a beautiful tribute. Now this fascinator, I quite like it, but I feel like if the fascinator had something that echoed the buttons, that matched the buttons, it would have tied it in perfectly. But I'm still not mad at it. It's still 99%. It's still an A+. The tassels on the shoulders is something new and different and unique that we haven't seen her do before. So that's a really fun touch for this coat. And the collar is quite interesting and different with the split high collar here. In 2021, she brought out that spectacular second best coat that she has for Remembrance Day, the Alexander McQueen piece, but this time she paired it with a black wide-brimmed hat and pearl drop earrings reminiscent of Princess Diana's Remembrance Sunday attire from 1992. It totally is, especially the shape of the hat. Guys, leave it in the comments. Do you like the big hats on Kate, or do you prefer the smaller, more fascinator style hats? Which one is your favorite on Kate? I will make a poll, but leave it in the comments because I can't wait to read the poll. I need to know now. Which one do you like better? Last year in 2022, she had another spectacular new coat dress. This is probably my third favorite. I absolutely love this asymmetrical diagonal sweeping of the lines here, of the stitching on that front panel, and then it comes down in an asymmetrical cut across. Gorgeous, gorgeous. The brooch next to the 3 poppies is absolutely perfect. Since it is such a plain jacket in that the only interest of it is the cut and stitching, there's no new colors, no new textures, no buttons. She can do these big snazzy earrings and a big hat, and it's not overwhelming her at all. So the balance she struck here is perfect. This was the first Remembrance Sunday following Queen Elizabeth's death just 2 months before, and the Princess of Wales took her place on a balcony in her new role overlooking the war memorial beside Queen Camilla. It is a Catherine Walker coat, and I feel like that year you could just feel it in the air. It was still so fresh with Queen Elizabeth's passing. Everybody seemed a little bit more subdued, a little bit more emotional. This year too, Catherine sort of teared up and King Charles teared up, unveiling the statues. I feel like for this family, everything is still so fresh, and these types of ceremonies and whatnot, or moments where they used to be alongside the queen, or you're honoring those who have passed in other circumstances. I feel like these types of days are probably still really challenging for them, emotionally speaking, quite taxing, because it's all still so new, and they're still constantly inundated with drama from the Sussexes, which isn't helping anything either. They have gone through such a huge transition the last couple of years, through Queen Elizabeth's passing and all these new titles and all these new dynamics shifting. And just before all of that happened, they went through all of the Sussex drama. So really they need a season of calm, I feel. And that's what I hope for them in the coming new year, that they have just a calm, steady time. So please leave in the comments what your absolute favorite looks are from Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Thank you so much for joining me for this video, and I hope you have a very happy day ahead. I'll see you next time. Bye!